Okay, we're starting on, I don't like to call it the faith chapter, it's the pistis chapter. And so I had to give you the word of the day. One of the words of the day, you should recognize this one, Pistis. Pistis. Because pistis, all right, you got your notes. Pistis is from piteo. It's a primary verb that means, piteo means to convince. Convince by argument, true or false, by analogy, to pacify or conciliate, by other fair means. Reflexive or passive, it means to assent to evidence or authority, to rely by inward certainty. The problem with that is there is no word in Greek for faith. There's no such word in Greek for faith. The only word you got is pistis. Pistis means specifically persuasion. Persuasion. Now here's the other stuff they added. You know, when they give you an IE, you know what IE means in English, right? Right? For example, IE, credence, moral conviction of religious truth, of the truthfulness of God, or religious teacher, especially reliance on Christ for salvation, in such profession. By extension, the system of religious gospel truth. So, in the first century, I went up to a Greek person and I said, "Hey, dude, pistis to you." And he knew that it meant a system of religious gospel truth based on Christ for salvation. I doubt it. There's no way, okay? Now, the Strongs and Vines gives us their niceness, but what has happened? What does Strongs and Vines give us the IE? Because in our Anglo-Saxon culture, that's what it's come to mean. But that is not what it means at all. Pistis, the word pistis, means to persuade or convince by, to have been persuaded or convinced by a logical argument. Period, dot. Throw out all of that stuff you know about faith. Throw out all that stuff you know about belief. Because it ain't in the New Testament. This word, and we're going to see this word used over and over again. That's why you got to know this word. This is the word that is used whenever you, I gave you the words it's translated. Assurance, believe, faith, fidelity. And nowhere does it say to convince by a logical argument. Why? What are they hiding? What are they trying to hide from you? Your whole life you read this, and it's wrong. It's not right at all. It's not even close to being right. Because we know that the Greek is a logos to telos. Right? Unstated telos. A logos is a logical argument. The telos of this logical argument is to be convinced of the pistis. And by the way, we're up to chapter 11. Chapter 1 through 9 was our logos to telos of what?
Christ is God.
Well, the gospel, right? Yeah, Christ is God. All those things. It's a logical argument that the point of the logical argument is to get to, and some say that, and I will agree, this chapter, the pistis chapter, the convinced chapter, is a culmination. It's a logos. But you're going to find out it's not what you think, right? What do we want in our English thinking, our Roman English thinking? We want a conclusion. We want the author to tell us, right? This is what it means. This is the point. But instead, our Greek writers say, well, let me give you another example, right? Or so to speak. I think it's really funny, and we're going to see, here's the other word, and this word is really interesting. Okay, P-H-A-I-N-O-M-E-N-O-N. If I just looked at this word, I would say phenomenon. Phenomenon, right? A phenomenon. What is that? Holy smoke. Actually, this is a verb, pheno, and this rest of this is a declension of the verb. But you know what? It isn't very far, because the basis for this word pheno is one of our favorite words, phos. Phos. Pheno, base of phos, and obsolete from pheno. To shine, to shine.
Like phosphate?
Like phosphates, like phenomenon. Phenomenon, I mean, this word looks like phenomenon. It's pretty close. The point I want to make is this, okay? It's from the base of phos. Phos is from an obsolete pheno, to shine or make manifest, especially by rays. To shine or make manifest. Now, in our English thinking, we even had it in our prayers. When we think in English about shine forth the gospel, what are we thinking? Okay, I'm not literally wearing a t-shirt that has a blazing message that's in phosphorus that says, you know, love Jesus, right? What we're saying is totally euphemistic. If I'm going to shine forth the gospel euphemistically, I go and talk to you, right? That's what what do you think the Greeks are thinking? Look, this word, it's to make manifest or shine, and the word specifically, pheno, means to light. It's a verb. It means lighten or shine. And you look at the IEs. I love the IEs. IEs, to show. Now, wait a sec. We have other Greek words to show, right? Edeo, blibo. We have lots of Greek words that mean show. But we have only one Greek word that means to lighten or shine. The point I'm making to you is, look, you know, we talked about it, right? How the Greeks shine. It's the ceremony. Remember, Jesus said, "Don't hide your light under a bushel." The Greek mysterion, especially the Mithrin mysterion, did that. So we are not talking about euphemistic words. We're talking about no kidding, shining. And therefore, a phenomenon, right? A phenomenon is a real thing. A pheno is a real thing. So take away your euphemism and take off your cultural blinders, because we're on for a ride here. Anyway, let's look. Let's look at 1 chapter 11. Here it is. Here it is in our NIV. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for, and of certain of what we do not see. Seems pretty simple, right? I gave you the Greek. Let's parse the Greek. All right, this is really interesting Greek verbiage, and you should be able to pick this up now. The word day, the first word is day. Actually, the first word is esti, but we put it into English sense thing. In Greek, many times the verb goes first. The verb in this case is esti. Do you guys remember emo egi? Emo egi. Ego imi. Ego imi. Actually, ego imi. Yeah, it's ego imi. Ego imi. In the Greek, it's imi ego. But ego imi, right? Yeah. We're talking about esti. Esti is. This is I am. In English, this would be he, she, or it is. Esti. So the verb in this case for this statement in Greek is. What do we know about is? Is it common?
No.
Very uncommon. It is an absolute statement. And here it's coming. This is, no kidding, a beginning of a new chapter, right? Remember, chapters are added. I think our authors or our translators or our, what's the right word for this group? The guys who put together the chapters, they tried to put them together in terms of logical argument, right? Not really logos to telos, because the logos to telos is a whole work. But in terms of what the Romans especially, the Latin speakers, would see as logical cuts in the text. So this really does begin a logical cut in the text. But what it starts with is literally este day. Este day, the word day in Greek is a transitional word that is usually an unstated word in English. It's an assumed word. It means but. It has been translated as now. But it says de, but. Pistis, not faith. Persuasion. But persuasion, este, is. The is added. Hypostasis. They say substance, but hypostasis means, and I almost gave you this word, David, but hypostasis, hupo, right? Under. Hupo is under. To a setting under. Stasis, right? In stasis means firm, not moving.
Sound like, is that foundation?
Well, they did substance, but foundation's actually closer. It is a verb, though. It means it's a verb. You notice that they took, in English we call these gerunds, where you take a noun and turn it into a verb. They did the opposite. They took a verb and made it into a noun. We see this a lot in our translators, because hypostasis means to set under, to stand under, to sit under, to a setting under. And yeah, it could be a foundation, but it's not at all exactly, it's not a noun. It's not a noun. So anyway.
Supporting maybe?
Well, we'll see how, let me finish parsing it and then we'll put it together in a literal and then I'll try to give you what it's trying to say. Anyway, but you're right, it could be a foundation. To a setting under, to stand under, of things hoped for. Okay, of things hoped for. The word is elpizo. It's not of things hoped for, it's to expect or confide. It's another verb. These are verb phrases. To expect or confide. The is added. It's eligchos. Proof. The proof of things. There's no things here. Pragma, a deed, an affair. A pragma. That is a noun. Not. Blepo. Blepo. Remember I told you lots of words for show? Blepo is one of those words for show. Blepo. To look at. Literally look at. To show. To look at. So here's what the literal translation is. But persuasion is a setting under, to stand under, to expect or confide, a proof of deeds not looked at. So literally, what does this literally translate to? Or what does this translate to? Not literal, a more reasoned translation. But persuasion stands under an expectation of proof of deeds not looked at. Okay, here's what our NIV tells us, and King James isn't too far off. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Here's the literal translation. But persuasion stands under an expectation of proof of deeds not looked at. These are completely different meanings. Completely different meanings. There's no hope in there. There's no certain of what we do not see in there. And there's no faith in there either. And there's sure a lot of things in there that aren't things.
The ESV says conviction of things not seen. Does it seem closer?
The which one?
ESV.
ESV? Well, not really. In other words, here's a translation. I'm trying to make it simple. Persuasion works best with deeds that are invisible. Persuasion works best with deeds that are invisible. In other words, the accomplishment of deeds that persuade are best done behind the scenes. Now, do you remember our whole talk, our whole thing that we've had in Hebrews? The problem in Hebrews, I got these people that were worshiping Tin Hodos. They're worshiping Christ in Tin Hodos in the temple in Jerusalem. Right? And they're sacrificing every day. The temple falls. The temple is destroyed in Jerusalem in 70 AD. They come to Alexandria. They're part of this place, Diaspora. There are lots of priests. There's lots of Levites. There's lots of Israelis, and most of them are, a lot of them are Teen Hodos. We know that a fifth of the whole city was Teen Hodos, right? So they're coming down into Alexandria. And now Hebrews tells us the problem. They've got an epi-synagogue because they've been kicked out of the regular synagogue. So they have an epi-synagogue to include all of Teen Hodos. And it includes, remember, Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, Hebrews. And there are some that are still sacrificing illegally in the temple. They're not supposed to. And Hebrews is saying, you know, don't condemn them, but you shouldn't be doing this, right?
You don't need to.
What's that? Yeah, and you don't, well, no, they believe they need to. Why? In the age of the Messiah, they have been told from the beginning, in the age of the Messiah, what sacrifice is still required? The Thanksgiving sacrifice. Now, we do the Thanksgiving sacrifice because John Chrysostom gave us the Mass, right? So we know what we're doing. These people don't know. Paul said, do what? Go ahead. Paul told them, go ahead and eat meat sacrificed to idols, right? And then you can do the Seder, and then you can do the Thanksgiving sacrifice. The guys in Jerusalem were going through the whole temple process because that's what they've been doing all their life. You can't just change what you're doing all your life, right? You're doing what you've been doing until the destruction of the temple. I think that was a miracle, right? It's miraculous. That's theological. God destroyed the temple, right? To do two things.
Keep people from worshiping that way anymore.
Exactly.
And the Dome over the Rock's been there how many years, and I think God is allowing that to just prevent.
God wanted to stop. In my opinion, God wanted to tell the Jewish people, Teen Hodos is right. But the Teen Hodos issue is there. All the Teen Hodos, there's lots of Teen Hodos in the diaspora, right? Greeks, Jews, Romans, all these people are accepting the diaspora, and they got to figure it out. Who was there? Paul was there. Paul was telling all these people, go ahead, eat meat sacrificed to idols, as long as it doesn't disturb your brothers, right? Go ahead and eat meat, and they could do the Thanksgiving sacrifice. But this is a different group. This group is coming from Jerusalem, and the Teen Hodos folks, they don't know. And so we know today, we have fully accepted the message of Hebrews. You don't have to do the other sacrifices, right? They're not required because Christ did them. Now, I believe Teen Hodos knew this. This isn't new news to them. But in the Messianic era, all the rabbis said, even today, if you go ask your rabbi, what sacrifice is required in the Messianic era? And he will tell you, the Thanksgiving sacrifice is still required. And we do it. We call it the Eucharist. We call it the Lord's Supper. If you ever wondered why we did it, that's why we do it. We do the Thanksgiving sacrifice. So, the problem for Teen Hodos is how you do this. And guess what? These guys may have been, the writers, two authors, may have been apostles of Paul and Christ. But what did the apostolic fathers tell us in Acts? Don't eat meat sacrificed to idols. They got a problem. That's a problem. So, persuasion works best with deeds that are invisible. Before, the author in the previous things was telling us, don't stop telling about the gospel. I go back to, and matter of fact, today, the kid's sermon and the sermon is about are you called and how do you shine forth, and that's where that's used, the gospel, right? I'm not saying be invisible, and I don't think the authors are either. I think they made their impression, and they're going to make even more impression for us. The point is that the deeds, when When you do a deed, you're persuaded to do the right thing. When it comes out what you've done, is that a positive or a negative? It's almost always a positive, right? Like Jesus says, when you do your praying, do it in secret. When you do your giving, do it in secret.
But
Right?
lead by example.
What's that?
Lead by example.
You lead by example, but you don't go, the impression that we get from the Gospels is, and I think this is a reflection of those same Gospels, that idea, right? So again, but persuasion is a setting under to expect or confide a proof of deeds not looked at. The literal translation, but persuasion stands under an expectation of proof of deeds not looked at. A proof of deeds not looked at. In other words, you're doing the deeds, but you're not saying, look at me. Look, I give all this money to the church. I gave, or even worse. I think the authors would say, okay, for example, I'm one of these people that is being written to in Alexandria. If I am a member of Teen Hodos and I'm going to the temple to sacrifice, and if I'm quiet about it, it's not okay, but is that okay? If I'm not being outward about it, right? I'm just doing what the other Jewish people are doing. So that's not a problem necessarily, right? But if I'm going and I'm saying, hey, I'm Teen Hodos, and I'm going to do the Thanksgiving sacrifice today, right? And I'm making a big deal about it, that's not a positive for the Teen Hodos. On the other hand, if I'm Epi Synagogue, right, and I'm okay, we're not going anywhere else. We're here at the Epi Synagogue. Every time the Epi Synagogue is open, I'm here. I'm studying. Well, what are you not doing?
Going out and spreading the gospel.
I'm not out with the people around me, right? Because the author said specifically that it's your interaction with the people. That's why they use these words, leligornet, not a worker in the church, which is translated in our thing, but rather a worker among the people. Literally a Roman official. A Roman official. And maybe some of these people are Roman officials, right? So there are deeds you can do out in public that can harm our church, that can harm the way we think. But the thing that can't harm it, you can't harm if you're convinced, right? And you go to somebody and discuss it with them. How can you harm, because if you go and you say, well, I'm confused about this, let's talk about this, I'd like to know more. You're convinced. You can't be unconvinced. But that person you're talking to can be convinced, right? It's simply, especially in our day. What's the biggest problem we have in our day? They say. Lack of social interaction, right? Well, people are interacting on Facebook and social media, right? And they say, before our parents' day, back in the days of the 20s and 30s, people visited, in the Victorian era, people visited every day. They had no phone call, they couldn't phone, right? And up to the 20s and 30s, read Dandelion Wine, probably the most seminal book of American literature about that period. Dandelion Wine talks about the transition. But in that period, people sat on they got together every day in their parlors, on their steps in front of their houses and talked. Today, people are sitting in their bedrooms with social media. And they're not communicating eye to eye. They're not communicating heart to heart. So I think the Hebrews are a similar message. Here's an isolated people who come to an isolated area and are forced into the epi-synagogue, out of the synagogues. They don't have the normal social interaction that we would have necessarily, right? Even in our culture. And so they're saying, get together, get with others, right? So anyway, let's go on. Let's look at 2. Because I think this will become very clear. Number 2. Here's what it says in the NIV. This is what the ancients were commended for. This is what the ancients were commended for. That's NIV. Okay, now we start our logical argument. The first was a statement. And if you remember, I told you logical arguments, they start with a definition, definitions, assumptions, and then you have the argument, and then you have the conclusion. Greeks didn't have conclusions, so they had no tellus. But we started with a statement. Este, persuasion is. That is a definition. Persuasion is. So we start in 2. 4, gar, assigning a reason. This is the Greek. That's the Greek beginning of every logical argument. 4, gar, assigning a reason. By, it's not by, it's enter into. It, taute, is, this, not it, this. The, ho, it's the. Presbyteros, presbyteros. What is a presbyteros?
Preacher?
Well, we have turned it, presbyteros, Presbyterian, presbyteros, we've turned it into a preacher or a elder. But the real word, presbyteros, is the Greek word for an Israelite Sanhedrinist. It's a member of the Sanhedrin. So a presbyteros in the church, in tin hodos, is an elder. But a presbyteros in Israeli society, and the Greek intention of the word is the Sanhedrin, is a member of the Sanhedrin. That's the 70. Sanhedrin means 70. Remember they had the 70 guys. This comes from back when Moses, remember Moses set up and they said, we need more people ruling the people. And so they put up tens, for every, 10 people they had one, and then 100 people, something like that, back in the Old Testament. But they ended up with the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin were the 70 people. And in this period, I'll remind you, because I love this. There were 4 members of the Sanhedrin in this time that we know were Sadducees, or Pharisees. All the rest were Sadducees, and they were priests. So, very interesting. Anyway, the presbyteros obtained a good report. It is not obtained a good report. It's marturio. Marturio. Marturio means to be a witness. They were witnesses. So the word does not say they were commended or obtained a good report or anything like that. What it says is this: assigning a reason, in this, the members of the Israelite Sanhedrin, the 70, became a witness. It does not say this is what the ancients were commended for. It doesn't even say anything close to that. It says, assigning a reason, in this, the members of the Israelite Sanhedrin became a witness. The deeds not looked at by the people. This original, I call it an absolute mistranslation. Because it is not talking, matter of fact, if it's talking about, it is talking about Sanhedrin. It's not talking about the past Sanhedrin. What's the current Sanhedrin? And where are they?
In the wind.
Well, most of them are probably right there. Right? And guess what? Anything they do now is what?
Not approved.
Illegal, yeah.
Yeah, it's moot. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Jerusalem's not destroyed yet, but the temple's destroyed. All but 4, all but 4 are Sadducees. They're Levites, they're priests. They're probably mostly priests. 4 of them just happen to be Pharisees. The Pharisees might be still sitting around in Jerusalem because they're making money and they have there may be a synagogue or 2 left there. But guess what? All those priests, where do you think they went? They didn't have any place else to go. I mean, there may, we know, like, what's his name? The cousin of Jesus' father, Zechariah,
Yeah.
the priest, right? He lived, a lot of the priests lived, but remember they would live in those cities. But once you cut off, what happened when you cut off the temple?
Food food,
income or
all that,
job or.
taken care of.
Yeah. So where would you go? Well, you go where the jobs are, right? If Boeing shuts down here, you're going to go to Boeing Wichita or whatever, right? You're going to go to where the jobs are because that's your job. Especially since you did it not just all your life. Everybody in your family's done it, right? So where are you going? So I think that this guy is talking not about the ancients, he's talking about the Sanhedrin, because a lot of his audience is who? Yeah, it's the priests that have come, because we know from Luke and Acts that lots of the priests became members of Team Hodos, right? So this is not assigning a reason. In this, the members of the Israelite Sanhedrin became a witness. What were they a witness to? The previous thing said, but persuasion stands under expectation of proof of deeds not looked at. What were the Sanhedrin a witness to just in that generation?
Yeah.
They were a witness to Christ and the resurrection. Exactly. Precisely. He's talking not just about whatever, I don't even like to use the word, amorphous faith. He's talking about, no kidding, persuasion, because they saw. Absolutely saw. And guess what? They not just saw it. They didn't just see it. They were participants in prosecuting Jesus Christ, right? They took him to the Sanhedrin. Okay, you're a member of the Sanhedrin, right? And they bring Jesus to you. This is a guy, the miracle worker. We know he's a miracle. Not only is he a miracle worker, the Talmud tells us he was a miracle worker. They had problems figuring out, where did his miracles come from? Did it come from Satan or did it come from God? You know, and Christ set him right on the path. How can a miracle come from Satan, right? So it's like, you guys are dummies. The Greeks would say, you guys are dummies, right? But these people, the same people that crucified Christ, that gave him to the Romans. And remember, you can't forget this. In this group, we have Romans, we have Greeks, we have Hebrews, we have the Egyptians, right? And of the Hebrews, you got, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots, and Teen Hodos. So, this author, we want to read this with our cultural blinders on and not realizing there is immense stuff happening. And there are amazing things happening. So the witness is a witness of the Sanhedrin. What do you think the authors would like the members of the Sanhedrin who happen to be Teen Hodos now to do?
Go talk to people and tell them about what they saw.
Bingo.
Give them proof to be a foundation for their persuasion or their beliefs.
Bingo. Because remember, this is 70 AD. 70 AD. So Paul's dead, right? Paul's gone, 55 AD. I always love it because Paul's writings are 52 to 55 AD. I mean, nobody would tell you they're not. There's no way that any of his letters could be outside it. Hebrews is probably someplace around or after 70 AD. So let's say maybe it's 70, maybe 80. Takes at least that time. A lot of those people are still alive who were there. Some of the members of the Sanhedrin might be still alive. They were probably elderly. But they were the ones, whether they were or not. Do you think they forgot? It was like range fire. When a person rose from the dead, it wasn't a hidden event. Everybody who was there were a million people. We know there were a million people in Jerusalem during the Passover. So when Jesus Christ was killed by the Romans, executed by the Romans, and rose from the dead, 1 million people went out from the diaspora. And then when they had they went out. And then when Acts happened not long after, right? and all the foreign Jews who were still in Jerusalem heard it, they saw it. They went out. Paul saw it. The Sanhedrin saw it. So we're talking about first, second generation people who know this. Let's go on.
How many people did you say were in Jerusalem during that time?
We know that 1 million, from the records we have, we know that Jerusalem had probably 20,000 people normative, because we have, census. The census numbers from normal Jerusalem, where there was not a festival, is about 20,000 people. We think that cities had millions. They didn't. They had very small numbers of people. So about 20,000 people, probably, you could take it more than that if you want to double that, about 40,000 people. But we think about 20,000 people were perhaps in Jerusalem at any one time, in normal city. When the Passover, when the three different pilgrim festivals occurred, there's 6 festivals in Jewish religion. 3 of them are pilgrim festivals. During the pilgrim festivals, every male human being who is Jewish, who has been circumcised, that's above 12 years old, is required, and with pubic hair, is required to go to Jerusalem for the pilgrim festival. If you don't, what does that mean?
You can't be saved.
You cannot be saved. Your sins cannot be forgiven. It's a required mitzvah. So we know from historical records that 1 million people were likely in Jerusalem during every one of the pilgrim festivals. Now,
50 times the size?
50 times the size, yes.
How did that many people even get to the temple?
Well, remember, in the Passover, we know, according to Josephus, they did the Passover lambs in 3 courses. They started with the priests, then they did the Pharisees, and then they did the regular people. And sometimes, we know that from Josephus, sometimes the regular people didn't get their Passover lambs. But you were supposed to do it, and we know for a fact, not from Josephus, but from the record of history, that and I wrote it in my book, Centurion, that many of the people, that they never, remember, that it went dark, right? And so they were using there's a water clock in the temple, according to Edersheim and according to records we have. So when it went dark, they are not allowed to sacrifice. So when it went dark, when Christ, died on the cross, then they were not allowed to sacrifice because they have to do it in the day. So apparently they went until about the midday, and finally somebody argued and said, wait a second, we need to start the courses, because if we don't, then there is no Passover. So during the dark, by the clock, the water clock, they began to sacrifice the courses. They probably didn't get to even the Pharisees' courses. So there was a year, when Christ died, there was a year without a Passover lamb. I've also got that in Centurion. Edersheim writes about that. That's one of these things that they talk about it in the Mishnah and the Talmud, in the Talmudic documents, about the year without a Passover. Interesting, eh? So, did I answer the question properly? Was there a question that was supposed to be answered? Let's go to 3. Here's what it says in the NIV. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. All right, let's see what it says. Through is added. There's no throughs in here. There's no bys and throughs. So all those bys and throughs, throw them out. There's no bys and throughs. It starts with a verb. Or the verb actually is neo. But pistis is a noun. Basically, pistis, persuasion. We understand it's noeo, to exercise the mind. To exercise the mind. That is added, the is there. Not worlds. Ages, the aeon, were framed. Kartatizo, to complete thoroughly. Kartatizo, to complete thoroughly. By the word, and its rhema, an utterance of God, theos. So that, two, it's not so that it's two things is added. They like to throw these things in all the time. which, it's not which, it's ho, which is close. Arsene, it's not arsene, it's to look at, it's blibo. Were is implied, not, ma, whether, may, gilnomai, to cause to be. It's not of, it's ek, from, things which do appear. Things which do appear, it's not things which do appear, it's this word right here. Phenomenon. Pheno, to shine, to lighten and shine. So here's the literal translate. Here's a literal, literally what it says in the Greek. Persuasion exercises the mind that ages were completed thoroughly of an utterance of God, to which to look at whether cause to be from to lighten. All right, so what does that say? Persuasion exercises the mind to show that ages were completed thoroughly from an utterance of God, which caused them to become evident. Caused them to become evident. Persuasion exercises the mind to show that ages were completed thoroughly from an utterance of God, which caused them to become evident. Now, I know that a lot of us aren't into this, but let me express something to you that's very important that you need to use. The Big Bang. The Big Bang proves something really cool. Before the Big Bang, everybody thought that the world was eternal universe, right? Eternal universe theory. Because, of course, God could not create. The problem for modern science, the Big Bang, is that what?
There's a beginning to everything.
There's a
And
beginning.
something came from nothing.
And the big problem for the modern scientist is what we call the